and today we're going to be talking about my worst books of 2020. So basically this is the first in a series of 4 videos that are going to be recapping this year. So I'll do worst today, disappointing, most surprising, and then the best. And we will save the best for last. I do enjoy getting a little salty about books, especially ones that I did not like. So this may be a little bit of a salt fest, but that's okay. That's what you're here for. If you're here on worst books of the year, you want to know why I thought it was the worst book of the year, right? I think so. Okay, so I did rank these. So the least worst book is at the top, and then the very last book I'm talking about is my worst book of the year by far. So these, I think, range in ratings from, I think there's a few 2 stars. Oh, it's about half 2 stars, half 1 stars, which makes sense. So the first book, the number 10, the least worst, is going to be The Amityville Horror by Jay Anson. I went into this book already knowing the story because I am a true crime fan, and some of the true crime podcasts I listen to talk about paranormal things, and there is a lot of speculation about the Amityville house and whether or not it is haunted. I should probably say the Amityville Horror is a book, and it was adapted into a bajillion movies. Probably most notable, the Ryan Reynolds one, for people my age at least. And it is about this family who buys this house where an entire family had been murdered by their son, and there is a haunting there, and they're basically driven out of the house in like 28 days. So I knew all that going into it, and I also knew the conversations that happen about whether or not this book is a true account. There's rumors that the author of this book and Ronald DeFeo, who is the guy who murdered his whole family, his lawyers, and the 2 parents of the family sat around, got drunk, and made up this story. So who knows? That's not the point. The point is, this book was incredibly boring. Having already seen the Ryan Reynolds movie, I hadn't seen the Margot Kidder one, but I had seen the Ryan Reynolds one before I read this. I was bored. It was very bare bones. It basically just tells you what happens. You're just being told everything. It's not showing you much. It is quite bland, and there is no interest in the book. So I gave it 2 stars because cultural impact, really. I think that, and it also wasn't completely terrible, like it's the least worst, so the other 9 books are worse than this, but I was just disappointed. Even though I didn't have high hopes, I was somehow disappointed still. But if you're interested in the Amityville story, I recommend watching the Margot Kidder, what is his name? James Brolin, whichever one's older. And then you can also watch the Ryan Reynolds one. I think that the old one is better personally, but if you want to see Ryan Reynolds shirtless and very muscular, watch the new one. Number 9 is The Perfect Girlfriend by Karen Hamilton. This is a book I read way back in February. And this book is marketed as a thriller about a woman who gets broken up with by this man, and she thinks she's perfect for him. And she basically, she stalks him kind of, and she's basically doing a lot of things to be around him, get a job around him, move around him, those sorts of things. This book, it wasn't a thriller. It felt more like, just like general fiction. There's not a thrilling aspect really to it. I mean, the stakes are so low. If you're telling me this is a thriller, I need lives in danger, I need suspense, and I just felt like I was following a really strange woman who was obsessed with someone. This was nothing like You by Carolyn Kepnes. That book, you're following a guy who stalks people, but there are stakes. The things that he is doing to people is shocking, and you are on the edge of your seat trying to see what he's gonna do next. And this one was like this girl like Facebook stalking a guy. Like, I'm sort of putting it blithely there, that's not exactly what she does, but that is like the equivalent of what she's doing. And it was just like, I wasn't here for it. One good thing about this book is it read really fast. I think I read it in like a day. But it did nothing for me. It's very forgettable. The only reason I remember what happened in it is because I looked back over these books before I filmed this video. And the next book is The Woods Are Dark by Richard Lehman. Richard Lehman is kind of one of those, I don't know if classic is the right word, but he does have a lot of books and he gets recommended a lot. He wrote a lot in the 80s and the 90s, and this book is about basically these people. It's like multiple groups of people. I think it's like a group of 2 and a group of 4 or 3, something like that. Stop in this small town, and there's basically rules in this small town where people who stop there, basically, I think it's like, basically there's this group of people called the Krolls, and if you stop in this town, you are fair game to the Krolls, and the other like regular people aren't gonna help you. That is like that's like the bargain in this town. And so this group of people get stopped there, and yeah, they basically have to survive for their lives. They get tied to these trees, but then someone lets them go, and there's like this whole thing. Problems I had with this book. Misogyny. I mean, that is like number one, and it is something, unfortunately, that I keep coming across in these 70s, 80s, 90s male horror writers. And I know that there are authors out there who don't do this, but like, I mean, Stephen King, Richard Lehman, I think I had it with Jack Ketchum. It's gotta stop. Like, I don't need to read about these disgusting men's fixation with women's bodies or women's nipples, or talking about their nipples getting hard the whole time. It had nothing, like, it had to do with the plot only insofar as one of the characters who is having this fixation on this woman, like, lets them go or whatever, and then that's how they're freed. But like, he could have just been infatuated with her. I did not need to know that he was constantly thinking about like her nipples and her butt and her boobs and all this shit. And I was just like, because it's not even like admiring the female body, it's like objectification, and I'm just like not here for it. And so that was like a huge part of this book, why I didn't like it, because that is just like persistent. Yeah, I was just looking at a review to make sure I didn't miss anything, and there's huge amounts of lesbophobia in this. And like, you could say all you want, like, oh, this was written in a time where it was different, but like, I don't have to like reading that. I just don't. And I don't think that that's an excuse. And yeah, so I don't know that I'll be picking up any more Richard Lehman. And I don't want to read about nipples, like a bunch, fixation on women's nipples, like a bunch. Like, if I wanted to read about nipples, I'd pick out a nipple book. Okay, so coming in at number 7 is A Stranger in the House by Sherry Lapina. This book is a thriller. Basically, I think this woman gets into like an accident or something, and then can't remember. I mean, it's like a stereotypical thriller trope of this woman gets into an accident, can't remember what happened, thinks her husband's lying to her, something doesn't seem right in her house, so she thinks maybe her husband has something to do with it, and all this nonsense. And I don't even know why I finished this book. Like, I read this earlier in the year before I had really decided on my DNF policy, where like, I'm just gonna DNF stuff if I'm not enjoying it. And it's just so boring. Nothing happens, it's nothing new. Like, okay, coming in at number 6 is You Are Not Alone by Guru Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. I have previously read both of their other 2 books. So I read An Anonymous Girl first, didn't really enjoy it. I thought it was fine, but it was fine in like the first half, but then the second half, no thank you. The Wife Between Us, 3.5 stars. And I was just gonna give them one more shot with this, because the premise sounded really interesting. It's about this woman who witnesses another woman killing herself on the train tracks, and she ends up tangled in this friendship of women that were friends of that woman, like because she became obsessed with her. She ends up finding her friends and everything, and then we're also seeing the perspective of those friends, and they're trying to keep secrets from her, and it just bored me. It was so boring. Like, this book, or this list, is really just a list of books that bored me. So I guess my main problem with this book is that I guessed pretty much everything that was going to happen. It wasn't original. It wasn't, like, I'm not sure. After reading this book, people were talking about the twists of this book, and I didn't know what they were talking about because there were no twists to this book for me. It just made sense. So yeah, it just was predictable, boring. So I think I'm done with those authors. I just think that I don't want to read them anymore. Rolling in at number 5 is one that might surprise some people. Well, not if you watch me regularly, but if you're just coming to me on this video, it may surprise you. I did not enjoy Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This book was his 4th book, and it is the 3rd of his that I've read. Really loved Lock Every Door. I thought Final Girls was fine. I have not read Last Time I Lied. So I was very excited from this book after having read Lock Every Door last year because I really loved that. And I mean, I feel like I'm a broken record here, but it was derivative. Having read this after having just recently read Amityville Horror, it just stuck out so much to me how much he just pulled from Amityville, slightly tweaked, and put into the book within a book in here. I mean, some things I can remember off the top of my head was the clock waking him up at the same time every single night. That is from Amityville Horror. They changed the time, but it's the same. Them being in the house for X amount of days and then fleeing it, never to return. Like, they did twist that out in their head a little bit by having the dad still keeping it in his possession, but Amityville ends pretty much when they leave, so we don't know like what really happened there. And then the other thing that really bugged me was basically the conception of it, the fact that the family poured all of their money into this house for it to turn out to be this, haunted house. Like, that comes directly from Amityville. So yeah, I wasn't really surprised by anything in the book within the book. It was completely predictable. I knew everything that was going to happen because it just basically followed the plot of Amityville. And then the framing story with the main girl, what is her name? Maggie. It was repetitive. Literally, if I had to see the phrase "the book" with capital T, capital B one more time, I was going to scream at the top of my lungs because it was really incredibly boring to just hear her whine about this book the whole time with no like personal growth or anything from it. Like, there was no point to the book, and that really bothered me too. Okay, coming in at number 4 is The Wives by Taryn Fisher. There are a lot of thrillers on this book, I'm just realizing, but it was kind of a year of disappointing thrillers for me, and that is such a shame. But I think I'm beginning to sort of get away from reading more of the domestic thrillers, which is what I'm finding most of the time is my problem area. But The Wives by Taryn Fisher is basically about this man who has 3 different wives, and he sees them on particular days, and we follow the one who he sees on Thursday. So she's referred to as Thursday. And we're following from her perspective, and it was really intriguing for the first half because she's starting to like look into the other wives and try to learn about them, and I really wanted to know how this was going to play out when it all came together. And then about halfway through the book, it just completely changed the type of book that it was, and I was not happy with it. I wanted to follow the threads of where I thought this book was going, not the absurdity of whatever that second half was trying to be. I feel like I am going to mention this actually in conjunction with the next book, which is What Lies Between Us by John Mars. That's number 3. I really need thriller authors to stop making the twist or the surprise like, oh, well, this person is mentally ill, so the perspective we're getting from them is not, they're an unreliable narrator, basically. Like, I'm just so sick of it. I'm sick of the demonization of mental illness, whatever mental illness it is. You know, it's frequently things like dissociative identity disorder and schizophrenia, psychosis, things like that. Also alcoholism. I just need thriller authors to stop. Like, it's boring. I've seen it 100 times and it's not fair to people who really deal with that stuff. Yeah, okay, so jumping down to number 2 is The Tenant by Katrine Engberg. This book, I hated. I didn't like the conclusion of, just off the top, I didn't like the conclusion of the mystery, but I don't even remember what the conclusion of the mystery was, and I literally read this a month ago because all I can remember from this book is how disgusting the main male character was. He was constantly talking about women's bodies, constantly talking about basically all these other women were beautiful, except his partner was ugly because she ate food and wasn't, you know, super skinny, and so she was disgusting. And he talks about how his dick's hard all the time around all these women, and then he sleeps with a woman who is supposed to be or who could be who is a suspect, and instead of, like, you know, waiting to see if she is like cleared of any wrongdoing, he just has sex with her. You know, he's just newly divorced from his wife, so of course she's a fucking terrible person and he's the greatest person that God put on earth. Whatever. I was just so over it. And the worst part of it for me is that this book is written by a woman, and the internalized misogyny is strong, and I couldn't do it. I spite finished this book, so yeah. And then finally, number 1, the worst book that I read this year is The Fear by Spencer Hamilton. You've probably never heard of this book. This is a horror novella that I don't even know why I found out about this, but it's a pandemic horror story. So it takes place during our current pandemic. And like, I thought it would be like interesting, and literally this male author it felt like he just wanted to spend 90 pages terrorizing lesbians, because the main characters are both, well, I don't know that they're both lesbians, but they're in a female relationship, and one of them is basically having like a psychotic break of some kind, and the other one is just trying to stay alive, and the stuff he was writing in this book was like, he wanted to torture women. He wanted to write a book where he could have all of these horrible things happen to women, and it's fine. Oh, it has lesbian representation. Great. Like, it was disgusting. I did not even finish this. I think I read like 90% of it, and then I was so pissed off that I just stopped. Yeah, the one that is having the psychotic break, her part was literally like the same thing, played over and over and over again, and it is like really horrible homophobic stuff that like other people have said to her that is like now, you know, replaying over in her mind, that sort of thing. And it was just like, I, as a queer person, did not want to sit there and read that, and it just felt gross. It was just gross. Okay, so those are my 10 worst books of 2020. Hopefully next year I don't have as many to pick from, but I think when you read over 100 books, you end up getting this selection of them that just don't work out for you. Yeah. So please let me know down in the comments, what is your worst book of the year? What was your least favorite thing that you read, and why? Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe down below to see more videos from my 12 days of Bookmas. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.